It's verse 155. Okay, and it states here, salvation is far from the wicked, for they seek not thy statutes. Okay, so for this guy to be an Edomite is an impossibility. Okay, for Cornelius to be an Edomite is an impossibility, man. Okay, because he's been judged, as an Edomite, which is destruction, man. If if he's an Edomite, he's the wicked. Okay, and the Lord ain't hearing or wanting to do anything for the Edomites, man. Okay, other than destroy them. Okay, so it's an impossibility, according to the scriptures, for Cornelius to be Edomite, considering that him and his whole house, was saved. Okay, so he couldn't have been an Edomite, man, and that's just plain and simple, man. Okay, it's an impossibility. Okay, now obviously Cornelius is known as a Gentile, right? Which is basically, in this instance, an Israelite foreigner, and there's a reason why he's known as a Gentile. Because, like I said, he grew up in the ways of Rome. Okay, he grew up in the ways of Rome and their customs. He was raised in that manner. Okay, like the scripture mentions about the wild olive tree. Okay, he was raised in strange customs, man. Okay, and that the Jews of Jerusalem wouldn't accept him. Okay, so read the account in Maccabees, right? Okay, showing you this divide that happened between the Israelites. Okay, and what made them become Gentiles? Okay, become heathens essentially, right? This is First Maccabees chapter 1. I'm going to read from verse 41. Is it this one? It's like a verse 10. Read this one first. Okay, it says here, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we have departed from them, we have had much sorrow. Okay, so they went out men from Israel, who were Israelites, man, wicked Israelites that wanted to become heathens, basically, to leave the customs of their forefathers and become heathens, to live by the customs of these other nations, right? Now, of course, these men, they would have had children, okay, and their children would have had children and so on and so forth, okay, not knowing they were Israelites, okay, because if these guys wanted to cut themselves off from being Israelites, then they're not going to raise their children knowing that they're Israelites, man. Okay, they're going to raise them up to be Romans or whoever they went out to. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. Okay, and there is no way. If you read Maccabees, you'll understand why the Jews have like an indignation towards these traitors. Okay, so to speak, because what they are. Okay. All right. This is continuing on. This is verse 12. So this device pleased them well. So then certain of the people were so forward hearing that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Okay, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. Okay, that's where you get gym from. Okay, they all participated in gym activities naked, man. Okay, because that's what the word gym means in the Greek. Okay, means naked, right? So they made themselves uncircumcised. So they stopped circumcising their children and all that kind of stuff. But spiritually, they made themselves uncircumcised. Okay, they detached themselves from the people, from Israel. Okay, So, and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. Okay. Right, I'm gonna skip down to verse, what was it, 55? No, 41. Okay, just skipping down. Okay, it says, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people and that everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Okay, so at this point, the Israelites' lives were at stake. Okay, and some wanting to preserve their life consented to this. Okay, and became as the heathen. Okay, others resisted. Okay, and that's where you get the Maccabean revolt. Okay, which is the whole book of Maccabees, right? It says, yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion. Okay, worshiping Zeus and all these other gods. Okay, not worshiping the Most High, Yahweh. Okay, so and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. Okay. So for the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land. Okay, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days. Okay, so we weren't keeping Passover, we weren't keeping Feast of First Fruits, and so on. It says, and pollute the sanctuary of the holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. Okay, so they profane the temples. Okay, said that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation. Okay, so like I said, they were being cut off from being Israelites. Okay, they were being assimilated into being Romans. Okay, and they were going to raise their children as Romans, and their children were going to raise their children as Romans, and they were going to forget that there ever were Israelites, man. Just like this very day. Okay, no one knew they were Israelites until Abba Bivens came, Elijah came and started teaching our people, man. Okay, none of us knew. We was all Afro-Americans or British or English or whatever, man. Okay, you was all heathens, man. Okay, going by heathen customs. Okay. So to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. Okay, forget the law, forget everything, forget your lineage, your heritage, forget all of that. Okay, because that's what it does. Okay, when you're being cut off from your customs, okay, you're being cut off from your identity, man. Okay, to the point where a lot of Israelites just believed they were Romans, man. Okay, and they looked down on Israelites even though they were the same people, man. They didn't understand and they didn't know. Okay. And whosoever who would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. Okay, so like I said, they were being threatened with death. Okay, and some of them gave in and converted. Okay, and others resisted and revolted. Men died, and but that was that cell that basically survived out of the revolt, the Maccabean revolt. Okay, and they reclaimed their temple and and all that, and their beliefs and all that kind of stuff. They were they were the Jews that were in Jerusalem holding it down, so to speak. Okay, even though they were going off, but they were there, believing in the Most High, and trying to keep the commandments. Okay, so they saw those the traitors that went off to go with the heathen and treated them such, man. Okay, they made themselves heathens, so the Jews treated them like heathens, man, and they would not accept them back. Okay, so that's what it was, man. Okay, that's why there was great contention between the Gentiles, okay, the Israelite foreigners, and the Jews in Jerusalem, man, because they were seen as heathens and they didn't even recognize them anymore. Because bear in mind that the time of this, from the time the Lord came on the scene, man, was about 200 years, man. Okay, so you could imagine that generations that came, and they became strangers, man. Okay, they didn't know each other like that. That all the Jews saw was a heathen. Okay, and all these Israelite foreigners, all they saw was, oh, these are Jews. They got strange customs and that kind of stuff. They didn't know that they were one and the same. Okay, a lot of them. Some of them maintained the knowledge that they're Israelites, like Cornelius. Okay, but obviously he was looked down upon. He was frowned upon by the Jews in Jerusalem because of his way of life. Okay, which is basically Rome. Okay, but yeah, from the timeline of this happening to the time the Lord came on the scene, man, was about 200 years, man. Okay, so yeah, man, a lot of things changed. Okay, and the way the two groups perceived each other, man, the Israelite foreigners and the Jews in Jerusalem. Okay, because they had been Hellenized. Okay, the Jews in the Jews that left had been Hellenized, man. Okay, pardon me. There was something in here that I wanted to read quickly. Bear with me 1 minute. Okay, no, actually, it was just the date I wanted out of this, wasn't it? Yeah, so basically, they was forced to worship other gods, man, and adopt that Roman way of life. Okay, so that's what went on. Okay, that's why you had Israelites scattered in these other nations, being looked at as Gentiles, man, just like the Romans themselves. Okay, but they were Israelites, just being raised in different customs, man. Okay, without the knowledge, man. Okay, all right. So again, going back to Acts 10, okay, he told you that he was a devout man, okay, and the Lord basically saved him and his household, right? But for that to even happen, man, you have to meet a basic criterion, man. Okay, so because not anybody can be saved, man. Okay, like I mentioned, Edomites 100% cannot be saved, man, and really that goes through for any other nation out there that are not of the Israelites, man. Okay, but Esau's got that special judgment where eternal damnation is upon them, man. Okay, so it's an impossibility for Cornelius to be an Edomite, man. Okay, but the basic criteria that you have to be before you even consider for salvation is that you have to be an Israelite. Okay, because that's who the promises was made to be saved. Okay, that the Lord was going to come back for, man. Okay, and bring them in from the four corners of the earth. You had to be an Israelite, man, because that's who that was prophesied of. Okay, so this is Romans 9. Trying to get this quick. Okay, Romans 9. Okay, this is the basic criteria, man. Okay, I'm gonna start from verse 3. It says, For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites. Okay, so all the brethren are Israelites. Okay, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises. Okay, so you have to be an Israelite first and foremost, man. Okay, that is the basic criteria that you have to meat